Okay, so we're starting Greek. We're starting classicals. First, we'll just give a bare bones basic introduction to Socrates. The thing with Socrates is that there's a lot to talk about Socrates. Actually, I believe he's like one of the greatest wants to start the idea of questioning in criticism or literature, but very little is known about him when compared to the other classicals. And technically, in our syllabus, we only need to start from Aristotle. But since you can't really talk about Aristotle, that's why you're having Plato. We don't even need to have Plato in the first place, but we're having him anyway. So, even introducing Socrates is overburdened, but you have to talk about Socrates if you want to talk about Plato. So Socrates began questioning, basically the idea of questioning works. He began that the century before Socrates and Plato were extremely creative. They basically were what the age of absurdism was. Basically, some would argue with that, but the writers, the artists that came before Socrates were all expressions of creativity. They believed you should be allowed to write what you want, you should be allowed to propagate what you want. Back then it was like way before. You have to remember this is what 420 BC. So there wasn't a huge difference between art, propaganda, politics, and all. They were all basically the same. So the Socrates and Plato, almost like the dynamic duo, they were against this idea of creative expression of whatever they want. Uh, Now, if we get to Plato, Plato is the man of forms, and he is the former of the theory of ideas. So, man of forms speaks for itself, really. He believed in a lot of strict and very copious amounts of rules. Imagine like an 80-year-old man who's all weak and tired, going on, this is not how things should be, this is how it should be. You guys are not doing it properly. You should do it this way, this way. That's what we did. That's the right way. That's kind of what Plato is seeing. Now, I personally would like to disagree with that notion, but again, that's my opinion. We will not go there. Plato was a Puritan formalist. He believed, and this is like one of his most infamous slash famous, controversial probably statement: the poets should be banned from the state. He believed in an ideal state, in an ideal utopian world, poets should not exist. Now, there's a lot to uncover behind that statement, but what you have to understand it. Okay, from an exam point of view, that's all you need to know. But if you actually want to understand what is going on here, you have to understand that he isn't against poetry. He isn't directly against poems, because Aristotle, sorry, Plato, even Socrates, then are very other famous uh, politicians, philosophers, poets, writers, all express their views through poetry. So it's hard to say I dislike poetry and poetry shouldn't exist if I'm writing poetry, right? So what he meant was not that the poet should be banned from the street, that the poetry that was being written at the time should not exist. So Plato lived in Greece in 347 BC. His birth name was Aristocles. Platon became his nickname, which he became Plato. He studied music and poetry. See, from a young age, he did study poetry. He was a part of the Athens versus Spartan War. His work, Republic, Dialogues or Republic, they're conversation like, where basically he, instead of writing like a fiction or a novel, he basically write dialogues between two people. One is usually Socrates. Socrates is kind of his like an older brother slash teacher figure, and that he is who he wrote as his protagonist, basically as like someone who is imparting wisdom to the common folk. Plato began his first European university known as the Academy, and he believed everything should be didactic in literature. Now, this was the era of philosophy. Uh, Plato, okay, if simply put, Plato believed emotion in a writer is bad, emotion in works is bad. Now, if you go through the text here, I'd say, I mean, if you want, you can read the intro part about his age and works, but I just, if you're looking purely from an exam point of view, just skip to his view on art. Now, that part's important. I don't think if you can see here, there's like a lot that's underlined, because there's a lot that's important here for you to understand the core idea. Because I do genuinely believe if you understand what he was trying to say, the core idea, you don't need to by heart a single damn thing here. Like, it will just come to you. Now his view on art, what did if you take a look at any critic, that's the first thing you ask, right? Okay, they are a critic, what did they think? That's what you want to know, right? So what did he think? What did Plato think? Plato had this weird, yeah, I'd say weird idea that he called the theory of ideas. Now, the theory of ideas is, it might seem complicated, but it's simple actually. Now, I'll just give like a modern example. Imagine if I came up with an idea for something. Let me think of something stupid, like, okay, a car. No, wait, no, wait. Let's see, a flying building, a building that has wings and can fly anywhere and can change location basically. That's an idea, right? So now, if I actually make that building didn't come from nothing. That building came from the idea of the building. So at first there's the idea of the building, then there's the building itself, right? Then if I take a photo of that building, then there's the photo of the building. That's good, right? Now, what no, what we all see is that, is the building real? We'd say yes, the building is real, the building is there. But what Plato believed is that no, the building is actually a replica, or it's like something that is imitated. And what is it an imitation of? The original idea. Because I can't bring this original idea as it is into the world, right? It doesn't exist. It's on the ethereal plane. So me bringing it from that plane to the real world is an imitation, right? It's basically borrowing. I'm copying it. That's an imitation. And when I, take a picture of it, or when I write about that building, and if when I write about that building, that's again another imitation of an imitation, right? Because it's already an imitation. So a work or something I write about is the imitation of an imitation. So if this is the reality, then this is once removed from reality, then this will be twice removed from reality. That's what Plato believed. He says in the Republic, ideas are the ultimate reality. Things are conceived as ideas before they take practical shape as things. Earlier today, I used this example. It came to me spontaneously. I don't know if it's like a good example, but I'll just say it anyway because I do think the example kind of makes sense. Because what you have to understand is that these people are philosophers, right? Your philosophers first, critics after. And philosophy at that time, basically in Greek, in Rome, they were obsessed with living a good life, living life basically. Now a good life meant different things to different people, but for Plato or people like that, they wanted people to live a fulfilling, purposeful, good life. Now, to propagate that, Plato could do various things. So imagine if I'm Plato right now and I'm trying to spread the wisdom I have to the people around me. Now, inside me, I have an idea of what it is to live a good life, right? That idea, that is the true essence. That's the first thing. Now, I can't basically just take this idea out of me and put it in your head. That's impossible, right? But that idea is the reality, right? So, the only thing I can do is that embody that idea so that I become this idea, right? So, when I do an action about, so if I being kind, in my mind, being kind might be a good idea, a good thing about this idea. So, me doing a good thing, that is the embodiment of that idea that exists, that is real. Now, if you see me doing that, that's once removed from reality. And if I wrote about that, that's twice removed from reality. So, like again, imagine you don't know how to use a computer. Now, you could read about how to use a computer. You could directly see someone using a computer and teaching you, or you could actually get to the computer and do it yourself. That's like the three levels, right? If I like actually get down and show you all these things, like I'm working with you, we sit together and we're doing it, I'm basically sharing that idea as it is with you. That's the true reality. Now if I just stand behind you, like standing here and giving orders, yeah, do this, do that, I'm directly projecting that idea onto you, but there's a gap there. The plane between us is gone, so it's once removed from reality. But instead I just sit at home and I write this, and then you read that and try to recreate it. That's once again removed from reality, right? So twice removed from reality. If you don't understand the example, just forget it. The only example that you need to know is here: a tree is nothing more than the concrete embodiment of its image in idea. A tree as an object is the imitation of a tree as an idea. The idea of everything, therefore, is original pattern on the thing itself is a copy. So everything that exists in this world is a copy. So when you try to write about it, you're writing a copy, right? And it becomes more imperfect because nothing is perfect. So when you try to make an idea into a thing, its trueness loses. Maybe the idea is 100%, but if you take the object, it might become only 90% true. And then if I write about it, it might go even lower. It might go to 75% true. So the idea of everything is original pattern and one is a copy. So it is once removed from reality. The object is once removed from reality. And now art, literature, painting, sculptures, they reproduce this, and hence it's the copy of a copy. It is twice removed from reality. The production, and okay, that's what his idea is, right? Now he believes that the production of art. Again, the thing here to note, okay, just before I go deep there, Plato believed art is bad because it didn't help us become good. That's all there is. Just like how a lot of parents are like, why are you doing English? How is that going to help you in the future, right? How is it that going to help you make money, basically, right? So that's the question there. How is reading literature going to, like, that's what Plato is asking basically. How is this reading this poetry? How is this reading this random poem about nature, about love, about death going to help you? Because it doesn't help you be a better person. It doesn't help develop the state meaning, the state of Greek. Sorry, yeah, Greek. So how does this help? That's what he's asking. The production of art neither helped no, art neither helped to mold character or to promote the well-being of the state, which is what he thought to be the two greatest human endeavors. The two greatest things you can do in your life is to either promote the well-being of the state or develop your character. Now, poetry or in general art never helped in this, so art is bad. That's what he believed, right? Uh, Hence, he believed that art is more dangerous to the individual and society than helpful because it barely gives little to any help while it increases a lot of the dangers that you can face. So that's his view on art completed. That's it. Um, I know I went into a lot of examples there, but you kind of need to know the example because you can't really by heart his view of art. You just have to like know it. Basically, intuitively it does come from within you. Next is his attacks on poetry. Hmm. So he's got some controversial things to say about poetry. Like I just said earlier, the same concern for good of the individual and the state marks Plato's pronouncements on poetry, judging by the constants. Again, the same thing with art. Poetry does very little good. It does a lot of bad. Hence, it is not good. We need to get rid of it. That poetry. That's what you think thought of poetry. Now, there are one, two, three, four, three thoughts he has on poetry. Okay, about okay how he criticized poetry. There are three major criticism he has on poetry. Now let's look at them one by one. First is poetic inspiration. Second is emotional appeal of poetry, and its non-moral character. You think about it this way: he hates poetry because again it doesn't provide anything of value, right? So okay, why? How does a poet write? Because we studied. I don't think every one of us studied in creative writing. Last time we studied uh, inspiration. Where does inspiration to for a work come from? You can either have it from your own life, through experiences. You can get it from someone else, or you're just sitting somewhere randomly or doing something, and suddenly this burst of idea that comes into your head, and you think, okay, I need to paint this. I need to write about this. I need to perform this. I need to work on this. I need to do this. That nowadays we just call it the subconscious or the unconscious, but back then it was called theol, theol, theol. It's almost like a divine. It was defined as like a divine idea. It's like they believed that it was the gods above sending an idea to us, right? So Plato believes that the poet writes not because he has thought long over what he has to say, but he's inspired. So a poet back then writes because he is inspired, but we don't know where this inspiration is coming from, right? It hasn't gone through the process of due reasoning. Sorry, cut away. What was that? Right. Okay. Look at it this way. A poet is bad because he's not a philosopher. That's what Plato is saying. A poet is bad because he is not a philosopher. A philosopher has to think again and again and again about what he's saying before he says it. A poet doesn't really do that, right? A poet gets an idea, he writes a poem, he publishes a poem. And again, I'm talking this about just back then, in that time. Uh, can such a sudden outpouring of the soul, this inspiration idea that comes to him randomly, can this be trusted? That's what he's asking. If someone goes through rigorous process of thinking and questioning something, and that's at one spot, and at the other spot you put something that you randomly thought of on a lazy Sunday afternoon, can those two really compare? No, that's what Plato is saying. uh, Sudden outpouring of the soul cannot be compared and cannot be a reliable substitute to truth based on reason and logic. So he says a poetry should only exist if it is subject to the further test of reason. Reasoning should come, like due diligence. You have to sit and think about the poem. That's what he's saying. Poetry therefore cannot take the place of philosophy. Like he said, philosophy is just better. That's what he's trying to say. It cannot be Poetry cannot be relied upon to make the individual a better citizen or state a better organization. There were therefore no poets in the ideal commonwealth envisioned by republic. That's again we go back to the quote. He said the poet should be banned from the ideal state. The only poets that should be allowed, he adds, are the ones that compose the hymns to gods and panegyrics to famous men. This poetry should only exist to praise the good or teach. That's what he's saying. Now, the emotional appeal of poetry. That's the second argument. The emotional poetry of poetry is that philosophies are rarely emotional. They are very intellectual, right? They make you think, not feel. But poetry makes you feel. So Plato argues that poetry arises from its appeal to emotion. It affects emotion rather than reason. It speaks to the heart more than the intellect. And sometimes these emotions overpower reason. We do things in the heat of passion that we don't think about. We get angry and we shout. We know it's not good to shout, we still shout. The emotion takes hold of the reasoning, and Plato believed this to be a bad thing. Now, emotions cannot be such safeguards as reason, he believes. And he says only a few, he complains that we can realize the meaningful effects of it if we let our own sense. Okay, here's the thing. Back then, about the thing about poetry is that he wasn't against emotions. That's important. Okay, it's not that he's against emotions. He's more against emotions fabricated. That's what he's trying to say. Basically, if I had a death in my family and I cry, that's fine. But I shouldn't be sitting around and crying because a favorite character in my work died. That makes no sense. That's what he's trying to say. Because he could go around and see, with reference to the tragic poetry of the age, in which weeping and wailing were indulged too full to move their hearts of spectators. You could see like spectators, the people reading, sitting around, crying, and he's like, "You don't understand how bad this is, because if we let our own sense of pity grow strong by feeding upon the grief of others, it is not easy to restrain it in the case of our own suffering." Again, he's not saying this because he thought emotions were bad. He thought over expression of emotions were bad because, again, why? Because it kept the reasoning aside, and we should live by reason. That's his whole thing. We should live by our natural senses of reasoning, and too much emotions can stop that. So we should not have too much emotions. But if I keep reading tragic poetry, of course I'll feel sad. Look at nowadays, look around, see the best example. You could be having like a totally normal day, totally average day, whatever, neither good nor bad, whatever. You come back home, you have your dinner and everything, you're going to bed. Now, instead of just going to sleep, you decide, I'll just listen to a few songs, and the first song that comes on the shuffle is a sad song. So now you are slowly settling into the mode of sadness. You start to relate with the lyrics. You start to see yourself in that position. You start to think of the sad experiences, and before you know it, you're crying. It's 3 a.m. You haven't slept, and this becomes a habit. It almost becomes like an addiction. You feed on this sadness. You are feeding on the sadness of another, and this basically keeps your reasoning and judgment. Because at that point, what would be the reasonable thing to do? sleep on time, get up early the next day, get enough sleep. But because you were overpowered by this emotion, the reasoning went away, right? That's what Plato is trying to say. If we let our sense of pity grow by feeding upon the grief of others, it is not easy to restrain these emotions in our own suffering. So he believes poetry uh, should, poetry fed and watered the passions and let them rule instead of ruling as they need to be ruled. He believes reasoning should come above emotions, not the other way around. And finally, the non-moral character. This uh, this is like one of, I would say, his most strongest arguments, and you can even see this nowadays. He believes Plato indicates poetry for its lack of concern with morality. Again, as we said, these classicals, they were very hung up on the idea of what it should serve. It should serve the goodness, it should make things better, right? So Plato indicates poetry for its lack of concern with morality, which is basically saying, because at that age, comedy doesn't really exist. Satire is still a growing thing in poetry again. So the main form of poetry were epics and tragedies. Now, epics involved the journey of heroic men and their struggles, whereas tragedies were usually the fall, tragedy, as tragic falls. So, the thing with poetry is that it treated both virtue and vice alike. It treated the good and the bad as the same. Again, this can be very controversial. This both sides have great arguments on the subject. Without regard for moral consideration, poetry treated them both alike. No, mm, just like it's a new thing that, okay, I'll just give the best example here. If you take a look at movies that came out in the 90s, in the 80s, there were clear-cut heroes and villains. There were clear-cut protagonists and antagonists, the good and the evil. But nowadays, it's not the case. The heroes, the protagonists are very morally grey. Sometimes the villains start making, the antagonists start making way more sense than the protagonist. There's a lot of gray area there. It's never white, black and white anymore. It's always gray. Uh, Back in the day, poetry was the same. There was gray. There was no black and white. And Plato wanted this black and white. Plato wanted this again. Plato wanted poetry to teach, right? So Plato wanted the readers to see this work and see, okay, this is black. I should avoid this. This is the villain. This is antagonist. These are bad values. This is good. This is the white. These are the good values that a man should have. These are the things I should take. That's what he wanted for the readers. But the more and more it started becoming gray, the more and more Plato started hating it, because it pained Plato to see virtue often coming to grief as the literature esteemed in his day. Because great examples we see, the famous saying, what I forgot what was exactly, but name one hero who died a good death, basically. None actually. In most of, if not all, these literature, there rarely is like a good quintessential everyone is happy ending. It is tragic for a reason. There is tragedy at the end, even though there is catharsis, even though there is, like, even if the evil fails, good never wins. Like, again, I'm going back to Hamlet again, but if you take it Hamlet, even though at the end the evil king dies, his uncle dies, evil is gone, so does Hamlet. Hamlet also dies there. The evil does lose, but the good never wins. Every single Shakespeare drama is the same. Even though the evil is gone, the good never wins. That paint Plato, again, not the Shakespeare's works, but like a tragedy in general, right? The example given is epics of Homer, narrative verse of Hesiod, odes of Pindar, tragedies of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. He says, and I quote, they give us to understand that many evil livers are happy and many righteous men are unhappy, and that wrongdoing, if be undetected, is profitable, while honest dealing is beneficial to one's neighbor. And he hated that idea. He wanted the people to see that if you do good, you will be rewarded. If you do bad, it is bad. Just because you do bad and you aren't caught doesn't make it good, it's still bad. But in these literature, it wasn't like this, and Plato hated this. Um Honest dealing is beneficial to one's neighbor but damaging to oneself. these ideas of self-sacrifice. He was against that idea very much. He didn't believe that one should give up things for the greater good. They should always strive for it all together. Um, and another like very famous example, if you take a look at most of these mythological works, you see the great gods like Zeus, um, Poseidon, or Aphrodite. They aren't actually all that good morally, right? They have very controversial things that they've done and said. And this paid Plato. Plato believed gods to be like, the pure symbol of virtue, everything good, perfection. And when he saw writers writing of these gods, these demigods, as flawed, human-like, them being, petty or unjust or revengeful, that was hurtful to him. Or guilty of other vices, which is Zeus is shown in most works as someone who's extremely prideful. And Plato hated this idea. Plato believed Zeus was like one of the greatest gods, just like any other god. But seeing him portrayed as a man of pride, it hurt him. It wasn't moral for him. He believed if even this god was full of vice, why would people listen to this god? uh, and heroes under the safe uncontrollable passions of all kinds, pride, anger, grief, and so on. These great heroes that you're supposed to look up to when they're given obvious flaws that should not exist, in his opinion, again, that hurt him. So literature corrupted both the citizen and the state. Hence, it corrupted the reader who read the work and also the status quo of the work. Hence, he believed in the non-moral character. There is a non-moral character in poetry. Now, so we should ask, okay, the issue with poetry is this and this. So, what should poetry be? That's when you answer the function of poetry. That's right here. The function of poetry, he believed, is simple, is to teach. That's all there is. All the other are just jargon words. He believed, although it is pleasure, mere pleasure cannot be its object, just towards morals. Truth is the test of poetry. He suggests truth as the test of poetry. Poetry should teach. What contributes to make it knowledge of virtue? It can be pleasure, but pleasure cannot be a goal. It should promote the interest of the state. Pleasure ranks low. Like he doesn't care much about pleasure. He believes a good artist is a good teacher because they can teach. They are imbuing this art with their ideas, which will then teach the readers. Artists who are able, out of their goodness of their own nature, of the nature to trace the nature of beauty and perfection, that so young men, like person who live in a healthy place, may be perpetually influenced for good. A good artist is someone who experiences life to its fullest, to its truest, and then writes about it and then creates it in the most, artistically pleasing way, to the point that someone new who reads this will know how to live a good life. That's what poetry is about for Plato. He believes poetic truth must be the highest truth. That's an important quote. Poetic truth must be the highest truth. That's what he believes. That's on his poetry. Next, we'll go to his drama. Now, I don't. It's again, it's not even in the syllabus. It's not as important as poetry, but still, teacher has taken it in the class and she has marked this, so I'll need to get to it. Okay, his comments on drama. It's basically the same as poetry, but worse. So, if you take a look at the criticisms he said on poetry, it's basically just that, but in a more critical, a more, I'd say, rude way. His comments on drama. All the observations of Plato apply equally to dramatic writing. The representation of drama are much more removed from reality, as much as a product of inspiration, as much as emotion and appeal, and as much uncontrolled with unconcerned with morality as those of poetry. So, poetry can be, it can be truth. It can, the poetry at the time, it could be truth, but drama never was. Drama was always dramatized for the people to see. It needs to have that spectacle. So there was obviously more imitation, more fakeness in there. So his comments on drama are again threefold. Its appeal to baser instincts, its effects of impersonation, and the idea of tragic and comic passion. We'll get to it one by one. Its appeal to baser instinct. Drama is staged, it happens on the stage, people are watching it. In order to please these people, the dramatist introduce certain things that will grab the audience's attention. It won't be just 3 hours of complete dialogue. There will be discussions, sorry, there will be discourses that happen there. So the dramatist introduces ideas such as quarrels, lamentations, fights, as we say, actual drama. There will be spectacle. Those exist to catch the audience's attention, right? As it says here, imitations of thunder and cries of beasts in comedy, lamentations in tragedy. These things will be added to grab the audience's attention. But all of these arouses our baser instincts, and baser instincts lead to emotions. And we know what he told about these emotions, because if you let these emotions to go, you will get forget about reason. This leads to bad taste and laxity in discipline. Such plays, therefore, according to Plato, should be censored. Okay, think about it this way. Again, Plato wanted us to live a good life, right? He wanted to have a good state. Now, if I hated the state, like if I lived in Greek and I believed the Greek ruling, the king, wasn't doing too good. Now, if that came from a point of reasoning, I could conduct discourses about it, I could talk about it, I could write about it, I could speak about it, with officials, and ultimately get the idea to the king that, do you doing this and this is not the best. Maybe you could change. But if it was coming from an emotional point of view, I'll be all like, why is the king doing this? I hate it. This has to change. I'll go talk to the king right now. You go there. Good luck keeping your head. So that's what he's trying to mean. When you let emotions take over you over reason, it usually leads to bad things happening. So when people watch this drama, okay, we see how it is, right? You go to a library, you go to actually, I think library is like the only thing that you can say here. You go to a library, it's people working with their reasoning, right? It's calm, it's quiet. People are just sitting doing their thing. They are challenging themselves mentally. You go to I don't know, like a very soap opera style movie theater. The first great entry of the protagonist, everyone's shouting, they're clapping, they're cheering. Again, this is not a bad, according to Plato, that's a bad thing. uh, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Plato thought that was a bad thing, because if the hero were to actually pass out or die in that the watchers would get angry. We have seen things of it where like great actors deaths in movies, the death of a character in a movie has outraged fans, right? They get very vocal about it. They let their emotions take over them, they go complain. Again, it's very prevalent in the manga industry, where you see like fans sending death threats to the authors because they didn't like certain aspects of work. Now, this is what Plato feared, right? It's almost like we came from at that time people liking Plato to after a little bit people hating Plato like Aristotle. Then for a long time people commented on Plato, thought he was bad for the most time, to hating Plato in modern and postmodern time, to almost coming to a point where we will have to start appreciating Plato more, because what he said, a lot of it has started becoming true, right? It leads to bad taste and laxity in discipline. That's the thing. Like um if I let my emotions take over me right now, right this moment, I get extremely angry, I get extremely sad or happy, and I just go berserk, do whatever I want. After a little bit, when my reasoning comes back to me, I will feel guilty. I'll feel bad. I'll feel like, oh, why did I do that? And that's our reasoning questioning us. And Plato thought, okay, the reasoning is questioning you because you did something bad. So this emotional outburst is bad. Hence, he believed that the plays which went too much on the lamentations in tragedy, the imitations of thunders and cries of beasts in comedy, these extravagant emotional expressions, he believed they should be censored. So that's his appeal, his criticism on appeal to base energy. Next is effective impersonation. This is what we commonly nowadays call as typecasting. When or like perma masking, where it's like you put on a mask for such a long time, that the mask becomes a part of your identity and you don't even know who you are anymore. In drama, like drama reacts unfavorably to the actors themselves because Plato believed by look, okay, you take a antagonistic character. The actor who played this antagonistic character would keep playing him again and again and again so many times that it slowly starts becoming a part of his identity. And before you know it, a common, normally average good man is now influenced by these actions, by these negatives. Again, we have seen this happen a lot, where the like the best example, Heath Ledger, we know what happened. He got so into the character of Joker that it actually affected his mental health. He, the idea, it's almost like the character never leaves you. Actually, if you truly commit yourself as an actor to a character, the character always stays with you. It never leaves you. Um, so Plato believed they let these evil qualities enter into their own nature to determine their own natural self. It represses individuality and leads to enfeeblement of character, uh, where this character now, he does agree here that when these characters are playing good characters, that is good because the good features of these good characters will rub off on these actors and they will become better men. That is good. He says these tragedies are therefore that present the best and the noblest in life area of positive benefit to the community and deserve to be encouraged. But you can't really have a drama where there is no antagonist and everyone is good. I mean, you could, but would people really want to watch that? That's the question, right? So that's his beyond effect of impersonation. He believed if you impersonated something as someone for too long, you start becoming them. And when actors are doing it for negative characters, that's bad. Now, tragic and comic pleasure. That's his final view. Uh, Here he says basically what is painful scene that causes pressure? This is like a question that has been plaguing psychologists and philosophers for not just centuries, for thousands of years. Like, why do we laugh when we see someone fall? I mean, not all of us, but when we see something not tragic, but like sad, or like maybe even to a bit mockingly, something happens to someone, we feel the need to laugh. What is it in the something bad happening to someone else that causes a good feeling inside me? Why does it happen? That he asks here too. Uh, Now again, Plato again here agrees that human nature is a mixture of heterogeneous feelings. Human nature, as natural beings, we have emotions, we have feelings, anger, envy, fear, grief, and others. We have both good and bad emotions. He's asking and he's saying there is nothing wrong with feeling any of it because that's your nature. But they can be painful by themselves in excess. When now the thing here is that if I just get a bit angry, I'll just feel angry for a while and then I'll forget about it. Maybe I'll feel just a bit guilty about being angry. But if I've been keeping my anger inside for a long time and I finally have like a huge outburst of anger, I after that will kind of feel better, right? It's like almost like a relief, like I got something off my chest. If I've been holding in my tears for a long time and I have like a proper good ugly cry session for like half an hour where I'm struggling to breathe and all, after that it kind of feels relieved, kind of feels good, right? A pleasure. There's a pleasure. So he believes there is pleasure whenever you express an emotion in excess. Express emotion in excess. The source of laughter is the incongruity between what he's and what he pretends to. So he's saying that the idea of comic, right? The comical character who's basically the what do we call it nowadays? The comic relief, right? Such a pleasure. Like, we see these comic characters do stupid things on the stage, usually something to their own detriment, and we laugh at it. He believes that such a pleasure is malicious, that it arises from the weakness of a fellow man. You're not laughing at yourself, you're not laughing at a character who's laughing at themselves. You're seeing a man struggle with something, and you're laughing at it. Is that really virtuous? That's what he's asking. Is that really a good thing to do? You're laughing at the weakness of a fellow man. What you should rather be feeling is pity for them. That's what Plato says. What have been proved here. Such a man should be one too whom we love, so that his weakness may put us into good humor. Why is that his weaknesses make us humor him? Isn't he just another human like us? No character can be hence a comic unless he is lovable. Now that's what he feels on drama. Now, he doesn't say much about style, just like a five quick back to back to back to back points. One to remember is that at the time it was mostly oratory. Yeah, works are oratory at the time, not written mostly. So when you apply the style in literature first, basic thing, know what you're saying, know the subject, have thorough knowledge. That's one. Now know the art of speaking. Okay, you know what to speak. Now you should know how to speak. After that, the thoughts of the object must follow each other in a natural sequence. Don't jump around from point A to point B. Go sequentially. Follow a format. Four, form an organic whole. At the end, when you look back, everything that you said should fit in with each other, should make sense. And five, this is an extra point, have a knowledge of human psychology so that you can understand what you're going to say from the view of the hearer. You can understand what the hearer is trying to say to you. The first ones, that's it. Now, the value of his criticism. I don't think we have that. I mean, I have it marked in my textbook, but let me see. Basically, this is almost like a summary of what we told till now. He was a critic of poetry and drama, but mainly he was a philosopher. The things he say is from his own vision. So when asked about the value of criticism, you can first inform about the idea of the theory of ideas. Well, he said we'll just go back to in a second. The function of poetry should be the same as philosophy. He says the function of poetry is to instruct, but it is not. Now, at the time, poetry was to delight and philosophy was to instruct. Now, he feels that the lack of moral teaching or indulgence in unrestrained emotions and melodramatic, farcical senses in poetry was bad. The art is imitation, imitating he believed all art is hence imitation. And there are two kinds of arts, the fine arts and the useful arts. Again, he is dividing. That's not important. We don't need to go there. Just stop there. Okay, that's all that's needed. That's all there is. So if you take like just a quick rapid fire, we take a look at a summary for Plato. First, his view on arts. We talked about his theory of ideas. That's important. You should know the theory of ideas. You should know how to explain it in detail. The best way to learn theory of ideas is like just how I learned it. No, if you know how you can explain the theory of ideas to someone who doesn't know anything about it, you know theory of ideas. So try to, once you learn theory of ideas, try to explain this theory of ideas to someone who doesn't know it, someone younger, maybe a child, or someone who doesn't know anything about literature. And by doing that, you will learn what it is. So no theory of ideas, it's twice removed from reality. His attack on poetry, 3 points. Poetic inspiration, where does inspiration come from? Inspiration isn't reasonable, it is randomly coming, hence you can't believe it. Emotional appeal of poetry, it appeals to our baser emotions, it doesn't appeal to reasoning, and hence it can lead us to do bad things or do terrible things, or feel the by feeling too much of others emotions, our own emotions can be uncontrollable. And three, non-moral character, the heroes and gods being made fun of, the good values, the virtue being treated as bad, the wise being shown as good. That then he believed the function of poetry is to hence teach. It should be poetic truth must be the highest truth. Then his comments on drama, again 3 points. He believed everything that he believed in poetry, he also believed for drama, but in a worse way. It appeals to Basin Institute because of all the dramatic expressions, of all the loud crying and the shouting and the sounds on the stage. It appealed to our Basin Institute, and that was bad. An actor playing a character could get obsessed and get one with the character to the point that the bad qualities of this character would rub off on the actor, and that is promoting vice in a human being which he believed to be bad. And finally, tragic and comic pleasure. Why is it that we feel happy when someone is sad? That shouldn't be the case. His observation of style, again 5 points. Know what to speak, know how to speak, follow a format when speaking, the whole thing should make sense, and have knowledge of human psychology and the value of criticism at the end. You know, the nature of poetry, poetry cannot replace philosophy, hence philosophy is more important. Poetry is just to delight, and hence it's bad. And that's basically Plato. Next, we'll start Aristotle. So, that's Plato. Thank you.